Evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the Tuesday, July 21st meeting of the Monmouth City Council. I'll call us to order and ask Pam Dornbush for the roll call, please.
Councillor Belts? Here. Councillor Carey?
Here.
Councillor Lopez?
Present.
Councillor McKeel?
Here.
Councillor Oberst?
Here.
Councillor Ridgway?
Here.
Mayor Kuntz?
I am present. And Councillor Ridgway, would you lead us in the flag salute this evening, please? Our first item this evening is the consent calendar. The only item in there are the minutes of our last meeting, which was July 7th. Those minutes were included in the agenda packet.
Move approval of the agenda of the consent calendar.
Second, Lopez.
Thank you, Councillor Belts, for the motion and Councillor Lopez for the second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed? Thank you very much. That brings us to public comment. The time we do have reserved for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda or scheduled for a public hearing this evening. And so Pam will run our timer. We'll ask that you come up, state your name, your residence, and push the red button. The button in the middle to start, and red means you're on. David Pastor.
Thank you, Mayor Kuntz. Good evening. Mayor Kuntz, I have two items, and I know it's a busy agenda, so I will try to be brief. First, I have a question for you. Would you be willing to ask the city manager this evening for a 60-second update on the progress on improving the sound system? All right, thank you very much. That's my question. Number two, I gave to the city councilman and women a copy, but I'll read some of it. Right now on the Monmouth Historic page, it reads this: Kalapuyan speaking people lived in the Monmouth area for thousands of years. Some of their descendants continue to live here. A group of immigrants from Monmouth, Illinois settled here in the 1850s and named their town after their old town. I recommended the following revision: that we delete the statement that talks about the group of immigrants and we replace it with more detail. That reads as follows: Monmouth was settled by Elijah Davidson and his family, originally an elder of the Christian Church in Monmouth, Illinois. Davidson was a devout advocate of prohibition. In 1850, 67-year-old Elijah Davidson, that's rather old, and his family set out for the Oregon Territory. By 1854, more than a dozen had joined him. They allocated 640 acres to build both the city and the college under the supervision of the Christian Church, which eventually became Western Oregon University. In February 1859, Monmouth was incorporated and officially became a dry town. Davidson and his fellow religious supporters believed that prohibition legislation suppressed and prevented nuisances, reduced crime, and improved the streets of the town. Monmouth remained the last dry town in the West until 2002, when efforts to repeal the prohibited sale of alcohol succeeded. So my request is that this would be placed on the page. And I also would ask if you could respond to me whether you will do that or not, someone on the council in writing. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll have someone get back to you on that. And Belinda Strouth.
Hi, good evening. I'm Belinda Strouth and I live here in Monmouth. I spoke last week about the community church in the park being in the town's newsletter. And after the meeting, I appreciate that the mayor and Councilor Oberst took a few minutes to chat with me about it. My understanding is that it was determined the event would be re-added to the schedule of events. They both realized that for some reason it had fallen off through the years. And I'm hopeful it will be included in the newsletter next year, and I do still await a written response on that. I had requested one. Secondly, due to time constraints last week, I didn't get to talk about the parade. And I just wanted to say what a wonderful event it was. Good job to every single person that was involved. And Pam, I wanted to especially thank for the really nice t-shirt she designed. I bought one and have had a lot of fun wearing it. It's very cheerful and patriotic. I drove a big truck for a local business in the parade. And I got to tell you, I got goosebumps and I was just smiling from ear to ear when I took the turn onto Main Street and saw nothing but a sea of red, white, and blue, happy, smiling faces. Patriotism and freedom was all it was about. There were no grumpy faces. There were no frowns. There was nothing but positivity. And it was beautiful. And I absolutely loved it. And last but not least, I'd like to address a comment to Councilor Lopez. I noticed and appreciated that you flipped your American flag right side up. It looks so beautiful that way. Many folks have noticed, and whether you did it because of the 4th or it's campaign season, it really doesn't matter why. I'm thankful that you did it. I appreciate it. It looks great. And that's it. Hope everybody has a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, we thank our Monmouth Independence Rotary for all the work on the parade. That is not something the cities do, and they do a terrific job. So we always appreciate that management of the parade. And Jason Mortensen. Again, if you just push the little button in the center of the microphone, the red light will come on.
Hi, friends. I'm Jason Mortensen, a Monmouth resident. I speak today about my concerns regarding surveillance technology. Automated license plate readers like those sold by Flock, Rekor, and Verkada are AI-powered camera systems that record passing vehicles, turning this info into a searchable database. We have a Rekor AI camera near the Monmouth Police Department and Verkada in Independence near some of the schools. I have some rhetorical questions for you to consider, and I know you can't answer in this forum. On June 29th, the Supreme Court ruled in Chatry versus United States that searching a third-party database for location information is a Fourth Amendment search that requires a warrant. Chatry establishes that a search occurs when law enforcement uses these databases. Does each search of these records have a judicial warrant associated with it? How many searches of this data are occurring? Are we voluntarily sharing this data with federal agencies in violation of Oregon sanctuary laws, like police departments in Southern Oregon did? Or are federal agents bypassing data restrictions like they did in Woodburn? Are these devices equipped with this signal trace upgrade that tracks every cell phone within range? How are we ensuring that those with access to this surveillance technology are not using it to track their boyfriends, wives, ex-wives, like a sheriff in Idaho recently did? Was an independent security audit performed on the Rekor system to verify the security claims of the company? The July 7th City Council agenda listed a Monmouth Police Department presentation on body cameras as a future agenda item. That topic is not on this agenda or listed as a future topic. Is this a sign that there may be a non-disclosure agreement in the contracts for these camera systems, like the city of Salem is experiencing with their AI data center scandal? Is it a responsible use of taxpayer dollars to fund these systems? Again, I know this is not the forum for answering these questions, but I thank you for considering them. I hope that there's a thread in my questions that will spur additional consideration and limitations on the use of this technology. Thank you. And I missed the cutoff to get documents in, but if anyone would like links to the things that I referenced, there's 7 copies here that could be distributed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And could you either give that or share that information or your comments with our police chief and city manager? Because if you forward, they can answer those questions non-rhetorically for you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And you can get their email addresses from Sabre in the back if you need to. Thank you. All right, that's all we had here in the room. Do we have anyone who'd submitted to be online this evening? We did not. Thank you very much, Pam. That brings us to our business agenda. And this evening, we do have a presentation of our fiscal year 25 audit, a little later in the year than we particularly hear from Kuntz, Blasquez and Associates. I'm going to invite Peter Gelser and our finance director, Sean Wade, to the table and make my annual disclosure that I am not related to anyone named Kuntz at the CPA firm.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Tonight, Peter Gelsler is here from Kuntz, Blasquez and Associates to report on the city's fiscal year 2025 comprehensive financial report. Once his presentation is complete, I will be addressing council to discuss actions that staff has already taken in response to some of the deficiencies, as well as the corrective action plan that's required for us to report to the Secretary of State. So with that, I will turn it over to Peter for his presentation.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. Yes, this audit is later than normal. We're 6 months past when we normally would be presenting. And it's really related to the loss of Susie and the significant changes in the financial department. Plus then we hit our tax season, and so we lost some time there. Overall, the city is in a strong position financially in terms of the audit. There is more revenue than expenses of over $4 million in the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. About $1 million of that is an increased grants, which may not continue, but you had the ARPA kind of grants, the end of those grants that were in this fiscal year. The other big thing that's in your financials is 25 is the end of when we were capitalizing this building. So there's a big $8 million movement from construction progress to now we're going to start depreciating this building over the life of 40 years or 50 years. I forget exactly what it was. So those are the big things. The only other small change in the financials themselves is we had GASB 102, which now requires us to present how when there's a change from a non-major to a major fund or vice versa, there's extra rows in the financials. That was just to kind of show where that reality happened when you have major to non-major. It's all cosmetic in my view. So that's the financials. When I always do this, I say, if you have questions about particular parts of the financials, I'm more than willing to go into them. It's kind of up to you which direction you want to go. I do want to kind of address the findings that we found, but I can do that after we talk about the financials themselves.
Yeah, let me see if anyone did have any questions or comments on the actual financial statements themselves. Seeing none, let's go ahead and go to the findings.
Yeah. And so there's a few more findings this year than we have had in the past. And I really think it's related to this big shift that happened in your finance department. It's not something I'm expecting as a seismic shift that's going to be continuing year after year. It's just a happenstance of what happened. So the biggest one is grant tracking. And we've had this issue before, and it was slowly getting better. And then this year, it kind of regressed a little bit where there was some activity that was recorded and that just nothing kind of matched. Some reports were sent to the state that didn't quite match what was in the financials. And so it's just something that needs to be done ideally on a quarterly basis or a continuous basis. So we don't have this issue where you're in October of the next year and you're recording receivables and deferred revenues at that point. You just have to kind of do it at a constant pace kind of thing. The second one we've also kind of done in the past, which is the fact that we're writing the financial reports. I have never been concerned about that. It happens throughout the state for most places. It's not something to be concerned about. It just, the risk is because we are drafting the reports and then we're also auditing the same exact report. There's a little bit of self-review that we're doing. We have policies and procedures in place to kind of alleviate those risks, but it's always a risk. So as long as that happens, we kind of have to kind of address it. You know, and as staff, as Sean comes in and gets up to speed, we can kind of revisit that issue and see if there's other options kind of thing. The third item, I'm forgetting at the moment. Accounts payable, thank you. And this is just, there was one transaction of over $100,000 that was not recorded as accounts payable. Whenever you have something that was a big item like this, it kind of creates a finding, even if you do not have a continuous list of a lot of accounts payable. So it's just a matter of making sure those bills come in that in June and July are recorded in the right fiscal year. Again, pretty minor in my view. It just, because of the size of that one transaction, it kind of elevated to a finding. Those were the really significant ones. I do have a couple other matters that are listed in the letter that was sent to you. One is related to capital assets. And this is because there's, the finance department really tracks all those expenses. And this particular year, there's a lot of expenses that weren't really capital assets, that were somewhat, it was inconsistent tracking, I would say. And it's just something that needs to be kind of shorn up for the future, so we don't have this issue where we're going back and forth, whether something is a capital asset, whether it isn't, those kinds of things. It was more to draw a little attention to it, just so we can kind of resolve it in the future. And then the final one is, there is a few general fund departments that were had over expenditures. And this is really just related to the fact that no one was really monitoring things, you know, in June to make sure that there wasn't over expenditures. So those were the kind of issues we found when we did our audit. I'm not sure if I gave enough detail, but.
Yeah, and I guess I should have pointed out to folks that looking in our packet version, the things that Peter described were on page 181 and 182. The three findings were listed there on packet pages 181 and 182. On page 180, there's another sort of summary of findings and question cost. And so that's something that I would like you to also explain to us, when it explains that you have an unmodified opinion that, you know, doesn't sound awesome, but that's a good opinion, right?
Yes.
So if you can explain the summary of auditor's results from the schedule of findings and question costs.
Oh, so yes, so that's related to the fact we had to have a single audit, and it's not something we had one in 24, but before that we probably had 10 years before since you had a single audit. And that's related to whatever you spend. In 25, it was $750,000. Now it's $1 million of federal money. You have to have this extra thing where we're really focused in on those expenditures. And because those expenditures related to the grant tracking issue. They kind of all rolled together. And so there is a finding for the federal audit related to grant tracking. It's the same exact issue. It just hit both sides of the equation, basically.
So, yeah, and you mentioned that we got a yes, a no on material weaknesses, but we got a yes on significant
Right.
deficiencies in both the financial statements and the federal reports. And those are the findings, right?
Yeah.
So,
There are basically three levels of findings. Material is the highest level of concern we have when it's larger numbers. Significant is just is kind of the middle level, and then other matters is not something we even give attention to the state. It's just for your purposes. Yeah. So.
okay. Other questions of Peter? Counselor Oberst.
I'm on page 122 in our print version and 170 in the packet. And that's the page that talks about the three accounts that were slightly overspent. Just a little more comment about that. What I'm seeing is a total of $30,000 out of a $60 million budget. So it's not significant, but just a comment or two, if you would. Where did you see that coming from?
Right. So Oregon budget law is very strict, I would say. And so each of your departments within the general fund, the appropriations that you list there in your budget, and as you adjust your budget during the year, if it's exceeded, then you have an over expenditure, even if it's exceeded by $1. And so in this particular case, there's three departments just in the general fund. All the other funds were fine. It was just these three departments in your general fund. That was the concern. And again, if it's just $1, we have to report it as an over expenditure. So, and it's typically what happens is as the year goes along, there's monitoring that occurs, and there's an appropriation resolution that's brought before you to make the small adjustments as needed. But in this particular case, that didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, Rochelle?
I would just like to make a comment on timing to try to bring folks back and remember where we were at that time. Susie had gone out for a medical procedure in June, and her anticipation was she was coming back the 13th of July. And at that time, she would have reviewed all of the final. That's when all of that reconciliation would have been done and handled. And but unfortunately, she ended up not returning and extending her time off. So that's when the statement, nobody was watching. I just want to make sure you understand what was going on at that time and remind folks of that. If I can also add this, and this doesn't have to go with the specific, but after Susie passed, then I hired a CPA to come in. And I also hired our prior finance director to come in, thinking that she would teach the new CPA how to move forward. And I thought it was like the best scenario going forward. We found out that necessarily wasn't the case. And so I just wanted to remind everyone of that as well. And now we have Sean on board, and I'm sure that you're going to hear how fantastic she is, hopefully. And I'm looking forward to not having findings next year.
So basically, turmoil in the finance department leads to a few dropped pieces here and there, and they've been picked up and everything. Yeah, that's what I thought. That was my general impression of things. Was we had an interesting year in the finance department last year, and that Sean came in on the short notice she did and got everything squared away is impressive. So thank you.
Yeah, now she'll get to be responsible for the 26 audit, for which she also wasn't here for most of it. But go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I also want to add, so as a reminder, it was at the end of June, we had a supplemental budget and also some transfers. Part of that was due to the cleanup that resolves these types of issues to make sure we're truing up our budget and how we actually spend. So fingers crossed, we're not in the same boat for fiscal year 26.
And then I had a question for you, Sean, and that is on what is page 185 of our packet, which is we are required to submit to the Secretary of State our response to those findings, and they're included in the audit pages, but also in a plan of action that we send to the Secretary of State for those deficiencies. My question about that is, I thought that had to include who is responsible for making the change and the timeline.
Yeah, so this is just a standard format. So when I go into the system to actually put the letter in, it asks who's the responsible
Oh, okay.
person, which will be me, and then the time frame. So when I talked to the Secretary of State, I said, so this isn't going to be 100% corrected for fiscal year 26. But we have started on it. They were fine, just say started implementation at the end of fiscal year 26 and ongoing. So that's when I'll be putting in that information.
Okay, I thought and my understanding is we need to approve this corrective action plan.
Yeah, that's correct. So in my staff report, I do ask for a motion that you accept the financial statements as presented, and then also approval of the corrective action plan.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure we knew who was responsible and what the timeline was for the corrective action, since we are required to approve that. And I wanted that additional information. Thank you. Other questions before we do our due diligence here?
I would like to add one other thing. So I do want to thank this auditing firm, Peter in particular, dealing with me my first few weeks while I'm trying to get the budget together and then trying to finish up fiscal year 25 audit. They have been amazing to work with and super patient. So I just appreciate working with you and look forward to this coming year.
Yeah, I will say, when we do the 26 audit, we do kind of evaluate if there's been improvements, regardless of whether they're fully done for the whole year. We do evaluate that kind of thing. So it's not automatically just because we just, John started in June, that those findings will still exist, kind of thing.
Councilor Carey.
Thank you for this. And just to make sure that we have the proper context here, this is a fiscal year that closed over a year ago. And because of some of your firm's challenges, Peter, tax season and so forth, and our personnel change, we're sort of just now getting to it. And this time frame was right sort of at the end. We still have as I recall, a fair amount of residue from all of that glut of money that came from COVID, all of the federal grant stuff that was coming at us. And at the same time, we're sort of juggling finance directors. So the combination of that are personnel changes. What I'm happy to do is to sort of set a new baseline. And, you've identified a corrective action plan that is eliminated in your staff report. And that's what we're going to submit, and that's what you'll be held accountable for in the future. And I didn't quite understand the management recommendations in your staff report. I got the deficiencies, that was clear, but I didn't know the origin of the management. Was that just sort of your own, Sean, your own identification of what needs to be done better, and you included that here, or was that part of Peter's report?
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. There were some management recommendations that the auditor did point out that we should address. And while we don't have to report to the Secretary of State as far as our how we're going to do our corrective action plan, it is something that I wanted to bring to Council's attention that I'm aware of and I will be improving upon.
Yeah. Thank you for sort of memorializing that, as sort of outside of the general audit. So that's good. This is a transparent report, identified problems that needed to be fixed and a solution for them. And so thank you, Peter, and thank you, Sean.
Just one last thing as well. So I have submitted our audit to Moody's, who is the organization that provides the bond rating for the city. They have confirmed that they are satisfied with the audit and they have no concerns and do not see our bond rating being impacted, which is great news.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right, as mentioned, there is a proposed motion.
Madam Mayor, you sure? Go ahead, it's on you.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I move to accept the financial year ending June 30th, 2025 annual comprehensive financial report and authorize the mayor to sign the corrective action plan.
Well, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Bells for the motion and Councillor Oberst for the second. Any other questions? And we'll look to Pam for a roll call, please.
Counselor Ridgway,
Aye.
Counselor Oberst,
Yes.
Counselor McKeel,
Yes.
Counselor Lopez,
Aye.
Counselor Carey,
Aye.
Counselor Belts.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Peter, again for another year of change in Monmouth. Hopefully things will settle down and we'll have it all cleaned up. All right, on our agenda this evening, then that does bring us to our work session. Oh, I'm sorry, we have our second reading and then adoption of the ordinance on public murals. Suzanne Duffner, Community Development Director.
Great. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. Yes, we are on to the second reading of the public mural ordinance. This is ordinance 1424. If you recall, the council had a work session on this last May. This is a product of our hardworking Arts and Culture Commission here at the city. They were the genesis of this, saw a need for it, and wanted to encourage more public murals installed in our city and have the proper process and standards for that. So that's kind of where it all started. And they did a lot of hard work to develop this over the last year. So you're seeing kind of the fruits of their labor, and this well-researched ordinance before you lays out the pathway for persons that are looking to do a public mural on an exterior wall inside the city limits. So it'll give a nice clear pathway on how to get those approved, provide for public comments on those, and some standards as well to make sure that there's quality control checks in place for those. So we're asking for council's adoption through second reading, and then after this, we'll start working on a clear application packet to be able to go out and hopefully recruit some new artists to develop some new public murals in our cider city. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions? Motion?
Madam Mayor? I would like to make the motion that we adopt ordinance 1424, an ordinance authorizing and establishing standards for the installation and maintenance of public murals and adding new provisions to Chapter 12 of the Monmouth City Code.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Lopez for the motion and Councillor Belts for the second. Bells?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to make this motion tonight, and I recognize that, what I'm about to say may be a little bit counterintuitive, but this is one of those instances where I believe providing a providing a little bit of structure around something in the term, in the, in the example of this ordinance, actually can encourage an activity, encourage public art in a manner that also, feeds into our city values and our vision for the city. So what I see here before us is not just more red tape, but it's actually a clear pathway for, artists and other individuals and business owners to, create murals and hold this public art up high. And, I very much look forward to all of the wonderful public art that will come through this. And I so deeply enjoy the murals that we have now. And so, I see this as, again, just establishing that clear pathway for, this activity to really be fruitful. Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, I will ask Pam for a roll call on an ordinance 1424, an ordinance authorizing and establishing standards for the installation and maintenance of public murals and adding new provisions to Chapter 12 of the Monmouth City Code.
Counselor Belts,
Aye.
Counselor Carey,
Aye.
Counselor Lopez,
Aye.
Counselor McKeel,
Yes.
Counselor Oberst,
Yes.
Counselor Ridgway.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, thanks very much, everybody. Make that code a little thicker, but that's awesome. Thank you. All right, now we'll take us to our work session. And our first item on that is actually, looks like we've got Suzanne Duffer and Planner Carter Craig to talk to us about the noise limits that we currently have in our ordinances.
Good evening. I'm here to introduce our first workshop item for tonight. It is focusing on the part of our city code that addresses noise ordinance or noise nuisances, maximum allowable noise. It is a piece of our code that was recently updated in 2023 using some of the language from CAMBI that introduced some quantifiable standards using a decibel reader for what could be considered an unnecessary noise. The code lays out about 5 different ways that something could be deemed an unnecessary noise and moved to abatement, including exceeding the decibels in this table. We adopted the table. The table is broken out by daytime and nighttime hours, as well as commercial zones, industrial zones, and noise-sensitive zones, which are defined as areas that have residences, or I think there are a few other institutional uses like hospitals that might fall under that. But what it does is it has created a situation where a lot of the uses we've already planned to allow in commercial and industrial zones exceed the noise limits in the table. So we encountered that problem on a recent development proposal. So we went back and we looked at CANBI's, and we found that part of their code that we didn't end up incorporating ours includes an exception for noises that emanate from lawful business activities in appropriate zones. So we have added that language to our code, and that is on attachment 1. Other than that, I do not have anything else here except for to answer your questions.
Councilor Betts.
Mostly a matter of curiosity. Since it's been 2 years, I believe, 3 years almost, have we had issues with reports of excessive noise, the use of gongs, things, those kinds of things?
Not that I'm aware of. Just from what I understand of sort of the impetus behind this change was to address some commercial activity in the downtown area, and then circumstances changed, I think.
I guess we would ask our chief and lieutenant in the back if they have anything to add to that, or a future report about the noise ordinance, how it's working. It was certainly something we talked quite a bit about how to implement, and maybe a future report would be better. I'm seeing a little bit of a nod. I'm seeing Chief Mike come up. What am I seeing back there? Chief Isaiah Haynes.
Good evening, Council. Madam Mayor, I wasn't prepared to probably talk about this tonight, but I think that overall, I think what I can report is that it's been going fairly well. We've had a limited duration that the ordinance has been in effect. I think there's been some challenges just simply going from what we went to, what it is currently, at times. And just based on some of the uses, but I think that, I can probably give a better detailed report in the near future. But I do think that there's some instances that Suzanne Duffner and Carter brought up tonight that certainly warrant some further looking into this. So.
Yeah, that would probably be good if we can get an update just in general. If we are looking at this, since this is just a work session, then if we had other changes we felt might need to be tweaked, we could have more data to make that decision. I'm seeing some nods up here. Councillor Oberst.
So as I recall, we adopted this noise ordinance in response to an establishment downtown that had extremely loud music going till wee hours. And now I'm seeing an ordinance that has an exception for noise in the commercial zone that has to do with your business. So if I'm running a establishment that might want to have live music until late, does this now take us back to exactly where we were? And I'm not thinking about any current establishments, but perhaps in the future, different owners, different locations. So, I just don't want to see us now flip back all the way around to where we were before we passed the new noise ordinance. Is there a time limit where somebody has to shut down on Main Street and let people who live across the park go to sleep? I can hear sometimes all the way at my house over by MES, the music from Main Street. So I want to make sure that this is not a complete flip flop back to the old standard.
Yeah, I think it's to be determined whether like having a band or a loud thing is integral to their use or if that is kind of accessory. But I think that's an issue to work through.
Okay, Councillor Ridge. Oh, that was it. That got his question. Councillor Lopez, then Councillor Carey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for bringing this back to us. I do have concern about different components of our code, potentially being in conflict with each other. And while this isn't a direct conflict, I do agree with the basic premise that, we specifically allow something here, but then say, oh no, it's too loud, right? I am concerned about, I believe it's Canby's language regarding, and I'm quoting here, exception of sounds caused by business operations in a commercial or industrial zone. To me, that seems a little bit too sweeping, and I think that there might be a, some level of happy medium. Since this is a work session, I'll just suggest, maybe we could look at being a little bit more explicit, because that says, just now you said integral to business operations as opposed to accessory. That's not what the draft ordinance language says. So it says business operations, which is very broad. Some other things that might be interesting would be, and this would be a broader rewrite, but if a sound originates in a commercial zone and is one of those loud things, but then by the time that sound reaches a residential zone is not over that, I'd be okay with that as well. And maybe, really what we're looking at is the impact of one kind of activity somewhere impacting a different kind of activity elsewhere. And so in this case, perhaps that activity is sleep, right? And I want to protect that. So, it seems to me like this may need a little bit of work or a little bit of clarity to achieve our goals. But I think that we're moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Councillor Carey and Councillor McKeel.
a little bit along the lines of Councilor Lopez. I'm searching for and trying to avoid conflicts, but as I was going through this, sort of remind me where, in broad terms, where our commercial zones are.
Along Highway 99 and then along Main Street and East Main Street.
And would that extend to the S curves? That's kind of a mix.
Yes, right. I would say all the way through to the Independence.
Yeah.
And then
And what about industrial sites?
there are the sites along Eccles and South Pacific. And then we have and then there's one developed site on the north side with the storage units, and then there are undeveloped parcels.
Yeah. Oh, that's as I had it. So, again, what we're doing in F here is pretty much allowing carte blanche if the sounds are, because it's on its face, it says whether the sound violates a maximum allowable noise limit set forth in that particular deal. Any noise that exceeds the maximum allowable limits is conclusively deemed unreasonably loud and raucous, with the exception of, and you can read that, to me, that opens it up, well, pretty much wide open. And then if you go to A, we're also concerned about the proximity of the sound to sleeping facilities, whether in residential or in commercial. And in residential or commercial. And we certainly have that interface along much of Main Street and Highway 51 all the way to Independence. So, just across the backyard, you're interfacing with a residential area. In the industrial area, the housing along Eccles and then I think east-west on Gwynn, I think we'd run into some conflict there with the residential folks, and we don't. And then the question would be, how do things like C and D and E affect F? In other words, it's okay for a business noise to exceed as long as they're in the commercial, it's a commercial business activity or manufacturing operation. Well, are we concerned about the time of day or night that it occurs, which is C, D, duration of the sound, and then E, whether the sound is recurrent, intermittent, or constant? So those are just some things. I'm on side with the concept of being a little flexible here, but I think we have to look at what it looks like on the ground. Now, maybe I'm reading that wrong, but those were, again, along the lines of Councilor Lopez's concerns. I'm in concurrence.
Sorry.
Let's let Councilor McKeel go, then Suzanne.
Yeah, as I was reading this, it kind of what Councilor Lopez was saying. It wasn't just a sleep issue. We had noise coming from downtown Monmouth that was impacting activities that were going on at Western. So I'm really worried. It's not just late at night, but also during the day where the noise was too loud so that other people couldn't do a different activity blocks away. So, and I'm afraid that this is going back to where we were. So it'd be really great to have some specific examples of what this is trying to address.
That sounds great. I just want to make sure that I understand where we're saying, but as what I understand is that in F, the word conclusively sort of triggers that it kind of takes away the factor of it all. And so we're not factoring anymore. So the change would allow for the factors A through E to still be considered by the agency enforcing. It's just currently, as it reads to me, noise limit shall conclusively be deemed. So if I stand at the property line and I ping a 71, that would be an unnecessary noise in the black and white of provision F as it's currently read. There are other ways to maybe address that in other codes. There are different sort of ways to read and measure the sound, but I still think there's flexibility in force on A through E, and consider those.
Go ahead, Councilor McKeel.
With exception is the problem that I see, because it says it's conclusively be deemed unreasonable with exception of sounds by business operations in commercial, which leads right to, we could have really loud music downtown that can go 10 blocks away. Sorry, because it's deemed part of that business.
Councilor Carey, did you have a follow-up? And then
It's sort of the same deal, but I read it as you do. I said, any noise that exceeds the maximum allowable noise limits shall be conclusively be deemed unreasonable. So by definition, it's unreasonable and unreasonably loud and raucous, with the exception of. And I think we've got to get away from we had an issue with downtown music and so forth, but there's a lot of other things that create that are part of a business that are not that. I mean, air hammers, nail guns, the whole, there's a variety of things that could be factored into that. And so I think the exceptions are fine, but there might be a little more parameters surrounding them, the exceptions.
Councilor Oberst.
Yeah, with the way I read this, and I think, John, you picked up on this too, is it almost says we don't have any limits for commercial and industrial zones. Because if you're making noise over the limit and it's a part of your business, you're okay. And that takes us right back around, because it says it's going to be judged to be in violation with the exception of noises that you're making as part of your business. So that wording is what stuck for me too, I
think. Councilor Ridgway.
I'm going to make a comment just to clarify that at least new commercial industrial uses, I'll back up for a second and comment on the outdoor amplification of music, I think is a very specific issue. And you're right, we haven't really called that out. And so I'm hearing there could be some language around that would have that turn off at a certain hour. I know we looked at a permit system and we moved away from that purposely in the past. That may not be what we want to do administratively, but I think we could add some language that would address that specific issue, because this is really debilitating. When I put on my economic development hat, somebody going through a drive-through and that amplification of that sound on the drive-through will trigger this probably now. So do we want to not allow, a lot of businesses in our community, I guess, is the issue that we're running into. And we do have one that is making a decision on whether or not to move forward based on what this language says now. So there is some time sensitivity to that. Instead of doing a complete overhaul of this ordinance now, we do have some time sensitive issues on a development that's ready to move forward now. So just wanted to kind of put that context back there to absolutely hearing the outdoor amplification of sound, but back to the issue of new commercial industrial uses. They go through a planning process, right? They go through a planning process where we can condition them. We can look at the specific uses within that and make conditions on them that will help mitigate some of those factors like lighting, sound, glare, things that would be considered a nuisance to surrounding areas, and then also put conditions that may make them more compatible. Is there additional buffer or landscaping or, the times of day? So please keep that in mind, that there's an alternate process to address some of the things, because there's so many different nuances and case by case that's really the more appropriate when we have that more information to look at that. This is a broader policy level that we're looking to apply, and then when we have specific commercial industrial uses, we do have a pathway to try to mitigate those the best we can. So just want to keep that in context as well.
Councillor Ridgway, and then I have something to follow up, Suzanne.
And I wasn't here for any of the discussion in 2023, so I'm sure I'm missing some nuances, but I'm usually of the mindset of less is more. And if we have an ordinance that has lots of exceptions and lots of caveats, I'm concerned about enforcement and having it, number one, understandable to the average person, and number two, not wasting the city employees' time in enforcing all the different exceptions. But if there was something as simple as, hey, here's a high end of what's allowable in decibels across the city, that's reasonable. Maybe it's 65 during the day, it's going to be higher during the day, and then whatever we determine quiet hours are, that it drops. Maybe something that's more standardized like that would be easier to put into writing and less debatable. And like you said, there's a different process that businesses would have to go through in order to mitigate some of their excessive sounds. And it could be more complicated than that, but I'd like to see less verbiage that's to the point and easy to understand, and having a lot less exceptions.
Yeah, good. I think our current, and there's no proposed change to what our current decibel levels are, right? So those current decibel levels, we've got them identified by time and by type of user, noise sensitive, commercial, industrial. I think, Suzanne, to your point, to your example, and I don't think, yes, amplification of live music was the issue that brought this to us, but I don't think we want to address really specific things in here either. I agree with Councillor Ridgway, less is more. I think personally, if I were talking to somebody and a drive-in with a speaker was the issue, well, then I think some of those other factors, the duration of the sound, it's not going on for 2.5 hours, right? It's recurrent and intermittent. It's not constant. I mean, we'd love it if our businesses had constant traffic, but they typically don't, in my observation. So I'm in that example, I wouldn't feel like there would need to be an exception for that business. Although the exception you're saying only applies to the decibel level. And that kind of concerns me because it feels like 70 is pretty high. But I think if we put that in conjunction with the other factors, then we would be able to grant them. Basically, we would say that based on all the factors, it's not constant. The time is a factor unless they're going to have other hours. Maybe there's a way to just use your conditions process with the existing ordinance. But if it's really literally that they're going to be over 70 and 65 decibels, I'm not sure we want to go accepting that, because then the exception is 110 decibels or 150 decibels, right? If there's no upper limit, then a business activity in a commercial zone, talking in a drive up, even having a band for 2 hours, but at this rate, somebody would be able to come in with some other very loud commercial activity and exceed the decibel level, and we wouldn't have any kind of limitation on that. I think that's a concern as well.
I don't, I guess not knowing what we're talking about in terms of, the business activity that will create the noise. I concur that, drive-through window or or the gas pump at the Shell station that spins out music to you. I'm not sure that's a problem that we need to be chasing. But if we do have some sort of, industrial work or fabrication of some sort that might be more, more onerous, then I think that's where we need to go. But, and maybe we can, well, I don't know. I haven't really tried to plug in the maximum allowable noise limits exactly yet. I haven't got around that, but again, I'm just concerned with the exception that seems to widen things or open things wide up. But anyway, more discussion for sure.
Except it's time sensitive. So yes, Councilor Elbert.
So I got curious after your comment about 70 decibels is loud, and so I asked the Google search some examples of 70 decibel sound sources. Washing machine, open office environment, normal conversation, an alarm clock, which strikes me as odd, but an alarm clock in normal conversation, restaurant noise, a vacuum cleaner operating at a moderate distance. Don't talk to my cats about that one. So it's things that we have in our everyday life. And we're talking about at the property line of a business. And it's probably fine at 7:30 at night. When it gets to be 11:30 at night, it gets to be really problematic. And that's where my concern lies. I think it's extending into the night and disturbing people in their homes. So I don't know what the answer is. I just wanted to give everybody a frame of reference for what is 70 decibels.
Councilor Carey has a decibel meter.
Yeah,
right now.
I'm just tracking you at about 64 decibels for most of that.
Falling down on the job.
Falling down on the job, and now I'm at 80. So I got this app when we had the issue with the deal, and I use it from time to time with the guys that are building and remodeling a house next door. But a lot of that has to do, and it's dealt with here. What's the proximity to things? I mean, 70 decibels here to, the mayor is one thing, and here to Sabre is another. Although the way she talks, it'll be about equal. But so I think there's a little bit of flexibility with that. I think some of the things that we have is protects against that.
Yeah, so we did do some research with the decibel reader, mostly at one site on Madrona. And there, so we did this at a few different times of day, on different days of the week, avoided the 4th of July holiday and the days around that for obvious reasons. And the maximums are regularly kind of like in the 80. It's not uncommon for the roadway and that sound there to peak at 80s. So the ambient noise there is happening there, but also while there are peaks of 80s, it's usually trucks coming up from a full stop at a light or at a crossing. But aside from that, it's in the low 70s is one average we've got, but otherwise it's in the low 60s, high 50s for the average reading over a 5 to 10 minute time period. So even with intermittent noises, the averages, they don't exceed 70. The sort of equalized score that they use to assess workplace health that's kind of built into the reader that we have, that is similarly in the low. It samples the data a little bit differently. That's similarly in the low 60s.
So do we have an idea of what this business would be running at to make it viable, that they're asking to exceed 70 during the daytime and 65 overnight?
So currently, I think businesses probably regularly make or contribute sounds that go over that. And if we measure that at the property line of a noise sensitive property,
But intermittently, as you say, and being off of 99 is different because you are getting roadway noise, which isn't being emitted. We're talking about something being emitted by a particular business. So you have a particular business that thinks they may exceed these decibels, because you mentioned that the exception only applies to the actual noise limit, not to all the other factors. How are they talking about 90, 110? What decibel limit would they be? They think they might exceed this 70.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Current noise limit for a commercial business is 70 daytime and 65 overnight. And the exception that you're suggesting is only to the maximum allowable noise limit. It's not to all the other factors. What decibel level are they think that they would be creating that would be over this? Do they know? Do they think it's going to be, what do they think it's going to be over 70?
Right, when the blower runs for at like 45 seconds to a minute, it emits a sound that they measured at the Dallas facility, which would be similar, at the property line of 72 decibels.
45 seconds sounds intermittent and not of a duration to me. That's a concern. Yes, Councillor Lopez and Councillor King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hearing the discussion here tonight, and I'm grateful for Councillor Ridgway, referencing when we created this, right? So having been here and part of those discussions, I do remember that this item F was put in place to give, city officials and the police department something really concrete and objective, right? And so and that was, at that request at the time. So it seems that creating a, blanket exception to something that, was requested so that enforcement would really be possible from an objective basis, is a little concerning. Hearing some of the examples of what these sound levels really are. I mean, I'm not an expert in audio spaces, but it seems like maybe we got this a little wrong. And when we're talking about decibel limits, one thing I do know enough about audio is that with each, I believe, 3 decibels, it's doubling of the sound volume. So we might want to consider pushing these limits up. But when we consider that, and for all of our broad awareness, moving 3 decibels, it doubles it. So moving up, just a few decibels would have great impacts. And so small changes in these decibel amounts could give those businesses the leeway that they need, especially in the daytime limits. And so I may be more interested personally in seeing, a revision of what currently exists as opposed to blanket exceptions. Thank you.
Carrie?
It strikes me, and Carter, when you made the reference to, Highway 99, the ambient noise on Highway 99 throughout the day, for somebody to exceed these limits, you're starting from a base of, what did you say, 55 as an average, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it doesn't take much to kick that over the allowable limit. So I wonder if there's a way that could be, separate out the noise that is made by the business activity compared to the sort of ambient noise. I mean, there's a lot more noise there and by the Dairy Queen, for argument's sake, than there is down there by Gentlewoods Park, where I live. So, that's where the baseline is a lot higher. So I don't know how we factor that in, if we do.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. If we're talking about a business, very different a business on 99 than a business out in front here, right? My other concern is in the current ordinance that the use of any mechanical device operated by compressed air, steam, or otherwise might be more of a concern than the decibels. Counselor Ridgway.
I wondered if this issue is akin to barking dogs. I don't know if it's similar in some respects. I know there's some differences, but we have an ordinance that talks about what that process looks like, and it's basically complaint driven. If we're not getting complaints about this happening widespread, yes, we had some complaints that kind of started this process. It's a lot of answers in search of a problem. So I don't know if something like that process could be, reformatted to apply to this, where if it's bothering somebody, then it's investigated, and then there's some reasonableness standard that's applied to see whether it is in fact frequent or prolonged and disturbs a person. Maybe that's too simple, but just a thought.
Yeah, that's how this is basically administered and enforced, is complaint driven, exactly the same. But I'm also now concerned that I'm hearing the location of the sound in a noise sensitive location, which would be a care facility on 99. So now I'm worried about them having high decibels near that. But we don't have time to redo the whole thing. Counselor Ober.
So is there any value in a notion of having something akin to a conditional use, where a business coming in that knows it's going to violate these noise standards on a occasional, short-lived, temporary basis can request an exception during their application process? And I don't know if that's a can of worms and a kettle of fish you don't want to deal with, but I just want to put that out there as a possible approach.
Yeah, the trade-offs there for the business is that it's subjective and there's more time and more uncertainty because a conditional use permit goes through the planning commission. In cases where something has a design review, there are requirements around design land use transitions. So when uses border each other, things like Suzanne mentioned with buffering or screening, depending on the type of thing we're trying to create.
That's a good picture that you just built with just those few words. Helps me get a better idea of how this interacts with the environment.
I need some guidance here, people.
Well, one of the things that while I'm on side with the idea of this being a complaint-driven process, if you got a dog that barks all the time and your neighbors complain and you lose the argument, you get rid of the dog. This might involve a fairly substantial business investment that they can't have, just sort of hanging out there. If somebody gripes and I'm going to lose, I got a lot of money in this project and I'm gone. So I think, and what that is, I don't know, but I think we need to have some, and thanks for bringing the intent to stabilize and define for the business owner, the investor, what it would look like. I just don't know. I don't know. There's more questions now than there was to start, but that's why you guys are good at it.
Yeah, so something we also found in our research is other cities that have sort of duration language in their code. So it gets at And they all kind of do it different ways, but they basically trade the scale that you're going over a noise limit by the duration. So if something's very loud, it doesn't have to be going on for very long to be an issue. Whereas if something's those 2 to 3 over a limit, that's treated differently.
Yeah, that's what I think we're looking at here, is that we want to consider all the factors. If there's a complaint, we consider all the factors. How loud is it, but how long does it go on, at what time, and who it's bothering? Councilor Bell.
Yeah, that was my memory, is when we were talking about it originally, we felt the need for guidelines. Yes, it's complaint driven. However, when an officer responds, then they need something very clear and concrete to be able to share. So I agree, the idea of, sort of some mathematic equation, duration times decibel times something. So I think that's the right direction to be going.
So that's what we were looking for tonight, is to have kind of a consensus, if possible, of what direction that you'd like us to go. If you didn't like the suggested language, which I'm hearing you didn't like how open it kind of broadened it. So if we could bring back some more specification around the duration, some language for that is that, because we had a lot of different approaches thrown out, variances and, no standards. And, so if we can get that consensus that, yeah, you'd like us to look at the duration language around that the shorter duration.
I don't even think you need to be more specific. It literally says factors for determining this include, but are not limited to, and it's just any one or any combination of them, right? I mean, I think it's more of a combination than any one of these. You can be out of, if you have 55 decibels, but it goes on for 10 hours, well, is that a violation? No. I mean, if you have 69, so it's close to 70, but it goes on for 10 hours, or I think it's more a factor of, you would look at all of these and weigh them, here's the consideration. I don't think a 45-second exceeding 70 that go, well, and I'm not an attorney or a police chief, but I would read this to say that, it's not exceeding 1 or 2 of these, not exceeding multiples of these. If we got a complaint, we'd say, man, it might be exceeding it in very brief periods, 2 times an hour over a week. Or, that's the way I would look at it. But Chief can tell me whether or not that is something they factor in.
Just going to peek in here. One thing that I will just clarify, and it's not written down in the ordinance, but what we decided on when we first went through this process is what is that duration? And we decided that we would measure the decibels for 1 minute and take the average. And so the what we have, because we talked about these things, we actually went out to the highway, and I understand that it's a different circumstance, but we would have spikes up into the 80s, but the average was still below, like what would be, I guess, what would still be reasonable. And so that's what we do when we get calls, is that we'll go stand at the property line and we will take the average of over a minute and take that average and apply it.
And we could say maybe in a commercial zone, make it 5 minutes or something. That's your practice. That's not the policy. So I think we could be very flexible there rather than a blanket exception. Sorry about that. Not sure if we gave you what you needed.
Yeah, I guess I just want to, because we know this is a time sensitive issue, a business is trying to make a decision on in our community, whether to locate here. So I just want to make sure I understand, because the schedule is tight, that you're looking for us to just maybe clarify some of how long that it exceeds the maximum decibel level. like in practice, more of as a practice rather than coming back with more specific language on 60 seconds, 5 minutes, an hour, or like, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this. And so it's trying to get some clarity, I guess.
Thumbs up to what Suzanne just said, thumbs up or down. More about leave language as is, but work on our practices. Thumbs up? Sideways, I don't care. Okay, you're getting thumbs up and doesn't matter to me.
We'll take that back and have a discussion with their business and then just make sure that approach still will work. And then we can report back. I know it sounds like there may not be a meeting at the first one in August, but we can talk about timeline, I guess, too.
I'm just saying, I don't see an appetite for changing the language of the ordinance.
Okay.
So we don't have to go through all the ordinance change process, at least. Unless you all really think that's not going to work. Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Carter. All right. Now, that moves us to a review of our council goals.
Thank you, Mayor. As you may recall, the mayor, the council, the leadership team met in February for a goal-setting session to identify the city's priorities over the next 2 years. Staff then brought the draft goals to the March 17th work session, where council provided direction on several revisions, including prioritizing the housing strategies due to their complexity and the staff resources needed to implement them. The document before you tonight reflects those requested changes, and we're looking for any final feedback or additional direction before bringing the goals back for formal adoption at the next city council meeting. And Suzanne is going to stay at the desk as this is focused on the housing. I also want to let you know that I was not here. I was in DC for LOC, so I watched the session, and I think we've incorporated all the changes that the council had recommended. But if there's something we missed, please let me know.
What was the date of that work session that we had?
March 17th.
He's looking at his notes. Quiet might be good here. Let's see. We'll give everybody a minute. Councillor McKeel and Councillor Karen.
So are we just jumping into where the changes are here? So section 3. I'm in 3.1, the part that's being changed had more direction towards affordable housing, nonprofit housing organizations, and the new wording doesn't specifically call that out. Is there a reason it was like we're not using affordable housing in that statement now?
Yeah, I think we were trying to encompass a couple of different strategies just to kind of simplify and clean up. We had so many strategies under here. So under the guise that all housing is needed housing, and that does include, that's the more inclusive, that includes affordable housing in it. Our housing priority strategy will further, or housing production strategy further prioritizes affordable housing measures, or the ones that get quite a bit of attention in that document. So I would say we are, we're not ignoring that the affordability issue is very important. I think we were just trying to encapsulate more of the housing production strategies into this one council strategy.
I would agree with that characterization, Suzanne. We need to rely and lean in on that housing production strategy. That was a well-conceived document and speaks to affordability, certainly, but all housing, really. And so I noticed that omission of that term, but I think we get to it if we use the larger document, the housing production strategy.
Councilor Ridgway.
I'll just say, I normally red has kind of a negative connotation, but being at that we don't call it a summit anymore or a retreat, but the goal setting session, I thought it was really productive. We were able to refine the goals that were really numerous. Suzanne, I think you did a good job of recalling why some of those changes were made, that we're using broader language that's a little bit easier for us or for city staff to follow. And we're not sending them off in a lot of different directions. I think it's a huge improvement from what this document looked like last year. So I'll just throw in my 2 cents there on that. Thank you.
Yeah, good, thanks. Yes, Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Looking at this document and some of those changes, and I'm someone who believes deeply in the need for affordability in housing and life broadly. I recall the conversation about changing some of that terminology, and the removal of that word affordable was because not every one of the of the specific strategies under that envelope was specifically about affordable housing. Some of those strategies were broader. I do agree that we should maintain an affordability approach, not just in housing, but in all city services. I'm not sure that I want to, open the jar of worms completely, but since we're talking about affordability, affordability of housing, affordability of utilities, affordability of all these things. And, I think that to some extent, the answer would be, well, that's been operationalized in how we approach situations here as a team. But since we are talking specifically about that term right now, just wanted to elevate that into the public consciousness, that just because some of the things have been marked completed or are ongoing things that we continue to put pressure in and focus on, but have been removed, doesn't mean that they go away. It means that they've been incorporated into our broader standards of how we do business. And so I love that we're talking about affordability here. I love that we're talking about affordable housing. And I actually very much look forward to broadening the scope of how we approach that conversation, not just, beyond affordable in terms of housing, but beyond housing in terms of affordable. And so, I look forward to, I think, working together, using these as a baseline and something we can measure, but really using these literally just as that, as a baseline, not as something that, is a reach. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think 3.1, talking about collaborating with housing partners, often means nonprofits, and that is for affordable housing or for specialty housing like our senior housing projects. So I think by saying we're seeking out those partners who are looking at different levels of housing stock, I think that really kind of it opens up a lot. So I think it's okay not to have that word there too, because we talk about the kinds of things we're looking for.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually concerned when the specific word, that affordable housing is actually something very difficult for us to actually work through because of the complexity of having developers and who have to agree to do affordable housing, working with different agencies, trying to get the funds in and tight budget times. I'm really concerned that to remove the word affordable allows it to really slip off of our radar. And even though affordable is encompassed in the other words, it's encompassed in the housing production strategy, it still allows us though to really take the pressure off the focus that we really need to get to make this affordable work for Monmouth residents. So I'm really concerned about removing the word affordable.
Councilor Lopez.
I guess I'll just jump back in to say that if that's a sticking point, I would be very open to adding that back in and moving on. I do believe it carries weight. And maybe we could say reducing barriers to developing affordable and needed housing and just capture the best of both worlds. So I do think that, memorializing it somewhere so that way we maintain focus does have value.
And I'll just offer potentially, if rather than put it in adding words back to the overall goal, to maybe 3.1 is very specifically more about a range of partners, but it mentions partners under the notes that would be developers, right? To identify low-income developers, identify sources of housing subsidies, quantify levels of need, identify productive partners. So 3.1, if we were going to add affordable back anywhere, I would maybe put it there rather than in the overall goal. Because, like we said, our housing production strategy does not just identify low income or affordable housing. We need the overall goal to meet our housing production strategy. One of those strategies under that could more specifically relate to affordable housing. And we took that word out as well out of 3.1, but if I was going to say put it back, that would be where it would go. I think, Councilor Lopez, you said if it's a sticking point, my first question is it a sticking point for everyone else? Councilor Oberst.
So one thing I've become aware of with some of the reading I've been doing lately is all across the country, all housing is needed. And whenever any housing is built, folks who are in smaller houses, apartments, et cetera, get a chance to move up. And so we can specify affordable housing, but I think we may be cutting off our nose to spite our face to concentrate on affordable housing and not recognize that all housing is needed at some level. Parcel 1 in the land swap is designated for medium density, specifically to try to draw some smaller and perhaps more affordable houses that are in the 5 times median income instead of our current 7 times median income home value. It's still not affordable, but it's more affordable. You open those up and you might find some folks to be able to get into housing they can't get into now. But I would hate to see us focus so intensely on affordable that we don't allow for other levels of housing to be built and to be pursued as well.
So am I hearing you? Let's just go with, is the word affordable anywhere in here a sticking point? Are there folks that, we voted on this and we changed this. This wasn't really an opportunity to go back and redo all that work. It was an opportunity to see how we're doing. So I just, again, take the temperature. Would people like to revisit the wording to include the word affordable somewhere?
You know, I don't know that if we were to reintroduce it and specify that over needed, whether behavior would change, whether there would be any demonstrable difference of emphasis or not. You know, I think I'm not opposed necessarily to including affordable, but I think perhaps in 3.1, there might be a comma with intent to focus on affordable housing or something like that. But I think the overall goal is we've shifted this to reduce barriers to the developing needed housing. We need housing, as Councilor Ober says, at all levels. I mean, right here in River City, we need that, and other places as well. So, you know, I would be on side with dropping something into 3.1 just as a reminder, but I don't know that it's going to change any of our behavior.
Councilor Belts?
So I was not at the goal setting because I had another meeting, and it doesn't impact me since I'm only serving until January. However, I don't have any heartburn of adding it into 3.1 as something like, you know, collaborate with housing partners to support affordable and or needed housing. But what I want to go back to is the very first goal, reduce barriers. I mean, really what we're talking about is, as a council, how can we make sure houses get built? And we don't really have a say-so in whether it is affordable or not. We can advocate, we can do all that, but when our goal is about reducing the barrier, that's really about looking at what are our rules, what have we said, what are we trying to do? And so I just want to make sure we don't get too hung up on the word affordable when I don't know. We all are focusing on it. I believe it's very important, affordability in general, but I don't know what we can really do other than what we've been doing, which is really paying attention to where can we have development, where can we help people grow, we're going to grow out or we're going to grow up, and how can we help reduce barriers to all of that.
Ridgway?
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of agree with Councilor Oberst on the needed housing framing, and that all housing is needed. There's a place in our community for many different, I guess, phases in life. Starting out, then, you know, as another house opens up, you can transition into something larger if you choose. And really, if you look at the makeup of Monmouth, we have a lot of variety, ranging from you know, this affordable is kind of the sticking point for me because that term has been defined in different ways. Different people see it in different lights, but we have entry level housing galore. We have apartments, we have condos, we have not condos necessarily, but duplexes. We have a range of different multifamily options, or they call it something different now. And I don't know that we need to focus specifically on one type of housing when that word needed kind of lets market conditions dictate what is needed and what isn't. Certainly we want to have affordability is a goal that we apply to all of our developments and everything that the city does. Nobody wants to live in an unaffordable town or city. I don't feel like placing that specifically, that word, into 3.1. And we already talked about this at the goal setting, not retreat, but the goal setting meeting. I would voice just leaving it as it is.
Councilor McKeel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And the affordable housing came out of discussions that not just having apartments for people to move into, but to provide starter homes that allows people to get that generational wealth built up. So I guess we could say it's a subjective term, but it's very specific in the way that we've been looking at that, I think, as a council. I like what Councilor Lopez said about affordable and needed, and I think it's been said a couple times. And again, I think words do matter. And when we don't have those words in there, it does affect how we focus and what we concentrate on. So I do think that it's important to keep it in there.
Yep, I hear you, but I also hear a majority saying that it's not, that we are doing the work and there are actual strategies here and there are actual actions here that are to work towards that, as well as towards other kinds of housing. So I am not going to entertain changing the wording of our actual goal at this point, but more to just go ahead and leave it as is with the addition of the strategies and the notes, the things that we're doing to make that happen. Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is maybe just a pet peeve of mine, and so y'all will recognize these words, I believe, from prior conversations about housing. Affordable housing is very clearly defined. The state of Oregon uses this same definition that is established by the federal government through HUD, which is housing where an occupant pays 30% or less of their gross income for housing costs, including utilities. Now, that changes based on year and on area. And so we calculate that as a function of area median income in terms of what is truly affordable. But it absolutely is defined, and it is not in any way or shape ambiguous. Thank you.
Yes, and that is in our housing production strategy, that's mentioned, so.
Well, and as part of this document, if we look under the goal setting session notes, under 3.1, we talk about identifying productive and potential partners, work with Polk County Housing, whatever that acronym is, but I believe that's it. And identify low-income developers, identify sources of housing subsidies, state, federal, and private. Communicate the housing production strategy, et cetera, and so on. So there's we're serious about it, and it says so right there. It may not be under strategies, but those notes are what's driving the strategies in my mind. And I understand the interest in that, but I just disagree because we have what we have there under goal setting session notes.
Other than that, were there anything else on here that folks thought we needed to change before we could adopt them? These are the changes we discussed last time, and I hear a majority willing to go forward with that wording, but was there anything on the other items? Remember, for example, we had to take a few things off because our staff capacity is pretty darn limited there. Right now, we're just looking at the goal 3, I think. Yeah. The others, I think that was the one we asked to bring some things back. You'd be okay with passing as is?
Just a question, and Suzanne, we've got some that are shaded a bit differently than others, 1.4 and 1.5 in sort of a tan shading.
I'll react to that. Those are new goals that were set. So anything in that color, you'll notice in the status, it was a brand new goal that was set at the session in February.
Okay.
There's also one on 5.3 is also a new one, but that's what that shows is this their brand new goals this year. They weren't refined.
Okay, good enough.
I think we'll bring back as is for adoption. Thanks for your time on that. All right, thanks. Hey, we have gone past our 2-hour time. All we have are reports and council comments. If we can keep those brief, go forward. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody antsy, so let's go ahead and we will move to that. I don't have much for the mayor's report. I don't have much. I'm gonna leave my comments till later. And that would take us to council boards and commissions liaison report. We did have a new application for the planning commission, but we do have other openings. So I want to make sure if we can go ahead and do a really good push to see if we can get some additional applicants. I'll have staff advertise that and hopefully set something in the end of this month or August to do those interviews, because that is a commission for which we do interviews, and I will set up some time. So if everyone can think of folks who might be willing to take that on, I'm going to ask that we really make a push to get that board and commission full as they are looking at new ways to direct their mission and their charter based on changes in state law as to what the requirements of the planning commission are. So we'll get some word out about that. And at that, I will take other board and commission reports. Councilor Ober.
Senior Advisory Board met today. A variety of things going on. We elected, I won't say new officers because we re-elected the same officers again. Barbara is starting her Strong Bodies classes Wednesday and Friday at 10 a.m. She sang Mark Landau's praises as our building facilities manager. She's getting her windows washed twice a year now, and it used to never get done. Little things like that. The new furnace for that building is coming on in April. August, another one of those 8 months. Great participation with the Art Walk. We had the Ash Creek Art Center set up a community panels of paint in the main room there. They'll begin work soon on the AARP mural, which is going to be painted inside on large canvas panels, and then they'll be available to hang in a variety of places, one might think. The big thing they're working on is a code of conduct. Barbara presented a very, very, very rough draft today, and she's trying to kind of wrap it around to parallel the library's code of conduct to have some consistency across the city. The big thing is that it wants to focus on welcoming language and not a string of no's. So instead of, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, but welcome people in and just remind them to be respectful of each other. And then setting up discreet and confidential corrective conversations when somebody has a violation, and conceivably how to deal with ongoing problems. And then finally, there's an age-friendly community survey, which is going to be making the rounds at Music in the Park. So if you have an opportunity to grab one of those, do so. And a final note, if you are a senior, or even if you're not, and you need any of a variety of bits of assistance, be it legal help, housing help, food help, medical help, all kinds of things, a possible resource for you is the Northwest Senior Disability Services website. And they do more than just disability services. So it's real simple, nwsds.org. We'll get you that website, and it will provide, as I say, a variety of resources available to people to help with ongoing issues. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Councilor Bell.
The Arts and Culture Commission met Thursday, the 16th. We welcomed our new member, Prindy Flug. She brings in a tremendous decades of experience and interest in arts and culture. We've had discussions about the gallery space out here, how we can find more wall space, which we'll see how that happens. And we did have our annual election of officers, although it was a re-election of all the existing officers. We had a wonderful artist reception on July the 11th, the same day as they had the art walk. We had about 40 or 50 people come through City Hall here and look at the art. One of the artists, Becca McCannell, actually sold some of her work, so that was a big plus for her. Thank you to Suzanne Duffner, who set up City Hall. She set up a table with some merchandise, and we also had some little rubbings that we could do that Spectrum Artworks provided. Councilor Oberst has already mentioned the AARP mural update. Last item is Struts and Frets. Oh, two last items. Struts and Frets will be having a play August 6th through the 9th and August 13th through the 15th. Across the street is Twelfth Night by Shakespeare, but it is done in a Western theme. So it's free. House opens at 6, show begins at 7, intermission 8, curtain at 9:30. They're hoping on the first night, August the 6th, they will have a shave ice truck outside. Last item, music in the park tomorrow night, coming up 3s. It is going to be very, very warm. We know that. So come prepared for that. But I hear there's a beer garden where you can buy beer if you'd like to quench your thirst. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a quiet time for our boards and commissions. Councilor Oberst, if you want to turn off your mic, I'll turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think I'll piggyback a little bit on the music in the park. Suzanne is planning on having some cooling resources tomorrow night at the concert, such as water and otter pops. And they were talking about misters earlier today. I don't know if they were able to procure that in time, but there is discussion and activity regarding that. ODOT is installing ADA ramps, and I'm sure you've all seen that. We just wanted to make sure we've been receiving complaints at Public Works, and this is operated by ODOT. So if anybody complains to you, please let them know they can call ODOT at 1-888-ASK-ODOT, and they can give some information to them there. With the reorganization of the Public Works Department back in April, which created our facilities manager, Mark Landau, which Councilor Oberst mentioned, I also want to mention that he worked and got the HVAC system repaired at the library. So we are now a cooling center again. So we're very excited about that. Our new judicial services contract has been assigned. Judge Lori Kukulis will meet with staff on August 5th, and then court will commence in September. It'll be on the first Wednesdays, and it'll be at 1:30 in the afternoon. And just to reiterate the savings on that, we were paying $27.50 a month. We're down to a little bit over around $1,000 a month. So it's substantial savings. So excited about that and excited about her starting. Council chamber audio system. I did have an update prepared for you. Cascade Sound of Salem recently completed a site assessment of the council chambers audio system. And so currently we want him to come in and give a presentation to the council so that you can ask questions of him, and we're getting that put on the calendar. But we're currently waiting for him to put together the cost proposals of some of the changes he's looking at. But I want to read directly from his report so you have a good status. Based on my experience listening and measurements taken during the short informal site survey, it is my opinion that the room in the PA system is performing adequately and is generally acceptable for people to hear meetings in the room. Furthermore, the city has provided an ADA hearing assistance system that would be more than capable of providing access to anyone with hearing loss or using hearing aids. In his opinion, the speech intelligibility can be approved, and that's with tuning of the EQ of the microphones and the PA system itself. And there's some additional equipment that can help with the tuning. And so that's what we're waiting to look for. But that's where it's all at. And so hopefully we'll have that information, and we'll have him come to council as well, so that if you have any additional questions. Suzanne wanted me to make sure that you guys that the council check out the cool new community quilt celebrating America's 250th birthday on display in the city hall. It's over by the finance counter. There's also 5 other locations in my town that have these quilts. Each of the 250 quilt blocks were created by neighbors of all ages and reflect a personal story, memory, or local connection to Monmouth and Independence. The quilts are on display now through the end of summer. And then August 4th is National Night Out. That would be our next council meeting, but the past few years we have canceled that to attend National Night Out. So there will be no council meeting on August 4th. And I believe that's all I have.
All right, that takes us to council comments and announcements. And I do want to say we didn't have a library report, but I do want to say there is a fun activity this Friday at 2:00. They're showing the movie Chicken Run at the library. So that is an all ages fun movie. And again, thanks to our friends of the Monmouth Library for providing the funding for that. But that sounds like a good one. And they continue to have all their other summer activities. So they've got actually tomorrow at 11 a.m., a guy, Andy Ferguson, and his Critter Friends for puppetry. So lots of things still going on at our library. Tomorrow at 11, hopefully it won't be too hot yet for the littles. And then more fun things coming up. So keep an eye out for those. Yes, Councillor Lopez, another announcement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we move into council comments, I want to talk a little bit about Music in the Park. What an incredible series. And something that I have not had an opportunity to discuss here in this room because I was joining remotely last meeting is council's presence at Music in the Park. And so this is an initiative that I've been happy to try to head up for a number of years now, maybe since my first year as a counselor. With a little gap due to COVID and having a very young child. But suffice it to say that I'll be in the park, set up, with myself and other counselors, remaining accessible to the public. And the spirit of this is to be, to take council out of council chambers and out of other work sessions or town halls, and be able to talk to people in an official capacity, but maybe a little bit more directly and informally where people are already existing. And so my apologies to you all, fellow counselors, that I have not had a chance to officially invite you out, but please do join me. I'll have a couple chairs and a table set up right at the end of the row of booths there, and hang out a little bit for Music in the Park and chat with folks in the town and folks that are visiting. I should say that right now I'm actively recruiting someone for not tomorrow. I will be there tomorrow, and of course you're all welcome, but I'm actively recruiting someone to head it up next week. Unfortunately, I have a work commitment that will take me away from that event that night. So if anyone would like, I'm happy to pass off a table, a couple chairs, anything you all need. And thank you also for the reminder of the heat. I am planning on trying to swing by one of our local establishments and pick up some Otter Pops to have extras there at that table as well, because we all want to be safe and healthy as we enjoy that wonderful community event. So that's one of my comments. I do have one other comment, and normally I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my own home and flags. And I'll be brief, Madam Mayor, but I want to say I believe that people are owed an explanation, right? Since this has come into the public dialogue here, I'm going to quote from U.S. Flag Code. The flag should never be displayed with the Union down, except as a signal of dire distress in instances of extreme danger to life or property. And some folks have, seen the flag flying in front of my home, and sometimes even a flag that I occasionally wear on a lapel pin. Today, I'm wearing the lapel pin that's Oregon State motto, right? She flies with her own wings, which I love. But But when I displayed the American flag, while American ICE officers are killing fellow residents and citizens, I have trouble displaying it right side up. So I'm going to say the names of two individuals, Lorenzo Araujo and Johan Guerrero. These individuals were killed at the hands of ICE last week. And I'm not suggesting that that terrible things never happen and that, that use of force is never justified. It absolutely is. But in this case, I believe lines have been crossed. And so, I'm happy to go into my beliefs on that more with anyone. Invite you to my porch, have a glass of iced tea or lemonade, and happy to talk about that. I don't really want to lean into that here in this space, but suffice it to say, it has nothing to do with election cycles. It has to do with my own sense of patriotic duty, and some things are bigger than others. I believe that one of the huge things is our nation's 250th anniversary. So it was reversed for that in honor of that. And I believe that's important. But those atrocities are still happening. And, why is my flag flying right side up today? Well, I promised my son that anytime I changed it or anytime we retire it, that I'd give him an opportunity to help me. So that just hasn't happened yet, but fear not, it'll be flying the other way, likely very soon. I hate that this is the reality that we live in. And as someone who, when I do wear flags on my lapel pin, those are pins that were given to me by my grandfather before he passed, and that I got in his things. So just be rest assured that if I ever do display it upside down, it's not without taking great personal weight and consideration into the goings on in the world. And it's also not a reflection of the great things that are happening here in Monmouth. And it's not a reflection, since I spoke about ICE, it is absolutely not a reflection of our incredible police department and public servants here in this town. I have full faith and confidence in them, and I am grateful to serve alongside them and alongside all of you, and for the city's citizens and residents of Monmouth. Thank you.
I do have one last tribute to make tonight, and that is to a woman named Evelyn Smith Lawrence. Evelyn passed away on June 24th of this year. She has been a resident of Monmouth. I think she and her husband moved here like in the 60s. He was a music professor at Western at OCE, and many of us may have attended the Smith Fine Arts series or have seen something in the Smith Music Hall on the Western Oregon campus. Those are both a legacy of Edgar Smith and Evelyn Smith Lawrence. She has been a force of nature in our community for decades, both in her support of the arts and of the things at Western that her husband started, but she's also been involved in many civic organizations. She's been on the board of directors of organizations here in town, and has been an absolute delight. And I will say that of all those years she lived here, she never lost that Kentucky accent. She was well known for her Derby Day parties, for providing Southern hospitality throughout our community. And even though she's lived at Capitol Manor for the last 13 years, I think, since her second husband, John Lawrence, died, she has been a big presence in our community, and she will be missed. Great obituary in the Statesman Journal about her life. And
did she make bourbon bombs? That's fine.
Did she make bourbon balls? I know, John, your bourbon balls are pretty good. I don't know about that. I never had her balls, so I'll have to find out. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
I'm
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned. And as a reminder, again, no meeting the first week of August because we'll be at National Night Out.